That's not true. I looked. I couldn't find it demonstrated in any research anywhere. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey. I'm a therapist and we talk about therapy things on this channel. I can't stop laughing because I fucked up my intro like 6 times before I recorded this. It's fine. Anyways, so today we are talking about Classically Abby because I have seen a lot of discourse about her content, but have yet to actually talk about her on my channel. From my understanding, Classically Abby is actually Ben Shapiro's sister and makes a lot of like weird conservative content and is also making like sort of religious fundamentalist content in a way. She's not a Christian person, she's a Jewish person, but she still is making a lot of this content that's centered around this idea of like a return to traditional values and like whatever the fuck. Full disclosure, I have seen this video before, but I have not watched a lot of her content, so we're kind of going in unprepared in a way. I'm very excited to talk about this though, because a lot of the stuff that she says is just like straight up wrong and like confidently so. So yeah, we're talking about Classically Abby and why she thinks that sex before marriage is ruining your life, specifically for women though. Also, I just want to address, we're going to use a lot of binary language in this video because Classically Abby operates under the assumption that sex is a binary and gender is a binary. We know that this is not true. We know that that's not real. Neither sex nor gender conform to this binary attitude of like one or the other, but for the sake of not offering caveats every single time I use the word male, female, man, or woman in this video, that's why we're using binary language.
Hello, Classic Crew, and welcome to today's video, where we're going to be talking about why our modern approach to sex is actually way worse for women.
I'm gonna puke.
Especially no orgasm.
If you are new to my channel, here we talk about classic living and traditional values.
Okay, thanks for the sweet alley-oop, Abby, because on my channel we talk about sex toys. Before we dive much deeper into the video, I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, Bellesa. My friends at Bellesa and I are doing a giveaway today where we are literally sending out free vibrators or gift cards for vibrators to everyone who enters the giveaway. As a person who never wins anything from giveaways, I'm very excited about this. Bellesa is a bi-women company that is about all things sexuality, and their mission at Bellesa is to empower people to explore, embrace, and celebrate their sexuality. They also sent me a bunch of goodies today that I am very excited to talk to you about because I had a very fun time stress testing all of these items to make sure that they were good, you know, because I don't want to promote things to my followers that aren't good or that I wouldn't personally love, and I loved them. One of the coolest things about a lot of the toys at Bellesa is that they come in these really adorable charging cases, which are super discreet and nice, especially for when you're traveling or if you live with roommates, but they also charge in here, which is really convenient. The toys that I want to talk about today, the one that I liked the most is this one. This is the Buzzfeed Air Vibe. This is Bellesa and Buzzfeed's brainchild, and it's genius. The Air Vibe is a dual stimulation G-spot vibrator and clitoral suction toy, and I saw this in the case and was very excited about it. I was like, oh, that looks fun. But also, look at this. Like, are you joking me? One of my other favorite things about a lot of the Bellesa toys is that they're very body friendly, and as a fat person, things sometimes are not made for me. And I feel like all of the toys at Bellesa are very inclusive, and they like very much drive home the point that orgasms are for everybody. One of the other toys that I wanted to talk about is the Demi Wand. This is a cute little vibrating wand. It has a flexible neck and it's very easy to use. One of my other favorite things about a lot of the Bellesa toys is that they don't have annoying modes. Very much this is an if you know, you know thing. There are controls that allow you to increase the intensity of the vibration, obviously, but you don't have to do the thing where you click through 75 different modes that nobody wants to use. It just increases the vibration the way that you want it, and then it turns it off when you press and hold. So if you want to be a part of the giveaway, go to the description and click the link there where you can enter the giveaway to for sure win something. I think you should. And let me know what you guys think of your Bellesa toys because I'm in love with mine. Thank you again to Bellesa for sponsoring this video. Let's go ahead and dive back into the video.
So for my Classically Abby book club over on my Substack, we recently read a book called Cheap Sex by Mark Regnerus, who's a sociologist, and it was really eye-opening.
Really quick. This is why I say the thing that I say about being a conscientious consumer of information on the internet. That sounds like a catchphrase. I should make a sticker out of that. But just because someone is a sociologist or has a degree in something or positions themselves as an expert in something does not mean they actually know what they're talking about, and it does not mean that they're operating from a place of evidence-based practice. It's entirely possible for people to be sociologists or like psychologists or therapists with degrees or that are licensed but are still operating from a place of like bad faith or like peddling information that isn't evidence-based practice. So I do really want to encourage people to continue to ask themselves these questions when you're consuming my content, when you're consuming anybody's content, like what vested interest does this person have in me believing the things that they're telling me? Why are they saying the things that they're saying? What position are they in to be advocating that I take their advice, etc., etc., etc.? Because this is a common thing that people will use their credential, not common thing, but like it's not unheard of for someone to use their credentials, and especially like this crowd loves to find people who are therapists or sociologists or whatever and say like, see, like they use our traditional values, so like therefore it must be real. And like, no, that doesn't mean that it's real. That doesn't mean that it's right. That doesn't mean that they have the right to force you to believe the things that they believe.
And I wanted to hit on some of the points that he talks about. So he talks a lot about how sex has become economically cheap in our day and age, where it's just easy access from both a physical perspective and an online perspective. You can have sex in really any form you want without working very hard for it. And what that has done to our society and especially to women. So today I really want to talk about how our attitude towards sex as women is not better for women in the long run. It's actually much worse. So let's get into today's video. Let's start off by talking about how sex became cheap. So really, the first thing that made sex cheap was the advent of birth control. Before birth control existed, sex and conception were inherently linked. There were ways to get around it. Sure, you could absolutely have sex and not get pregnant, but there was always a risk that you would get pregnant. And with that in mind, it meant that you had to be more responsible about who you had sex with and when you had sex, or at least you should have been, because I'm going to explode. This pushes my buttons so much because this is a very common conservative talking point that the advent of birth control caused this like breakdown in our moral fiber and will be the end of morality in society as we know. And people are just out here fucking each other all the time everywhere. It's in the streets. It's like, no, it's fucking not. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in the video. But first of all, younger generations far and away are having less casual sex than generations past. But also birth control existing or becoming like legalized and socialized as like a less shameful thing didn't inherently result in people just like all of a sudden deciding that they wanted to have sex all the time, everywhere, always. This is a phenomenon that's existed throughout history. Human beings explore their sexuality and have sex with other people, not always for the purpose of procreation. I'm not gonna like give you a PowerPoint presentation about human sexuality, A, because I'm not a sexologist, B, because there's lots of people who talk about sex in a much more educated and concise and interesting way than I will. Kinky History on TikTok is actually a really great resource if you want to learn about the history of sex and human sexuality. And so like I wanted to like pause here to talk about this because it pushes my buttons, this assertion that birth control equals the breakdown of moral fiber and equals people no longer having sex for the purpose of procreation, because that's been happening, baby. Like that's been happening for a very long time. Lots of people have been having sex without the intention of getting pregnant. And this is also a logical fallacy, this idea that like if you're having sex then you're also consenting to potentially having a child. That's not true. That's not an inherent part of having sex. That's not like a necessary part of having sex with someone. A, because not all sex exists between people who can get each other pregnant, but B, because having sex and like consenting to an act doesn't mean that you're consenting to the potential consequences of that act all the time. That would be like saying you got in a car knowing that you could get in a car accident, and so therefore you're not allowed to sue someone who's a drunk driver because you consented to the consequences of that activity. That's not fucking true. Nobody fucking says that. Like, that's such a logical leap. It doesn't make any fucking sense. This is like the only area that conservatives really push this attitude, and it pushes my buttons, clearly. You weren't, then you could get pregnant, and that could have consequences that perhaps you didn't want to happen. With the advent of birth control, physical pleasure became entirely separate from the consequence of that physical pleasure.
That's not true.
Sex became something totally separate than having a baby, which actually was not a good thing.
Why?
It meant that sex became so much more about just stimulation than it did about the connection you were having with that other person.
I am having flashbacks to Ben Shapiro talking about how not normal it is for women to have, can I say this on YouTube? It's not normal for women to have wet pussies. Like, Ben Shapiro really outed himself as not making his wife wet, and like this seems to run in the family, that we don't understand what like the purpose behind sexual intimacy is. This idea that having sex not for the purpose of procreation means that you're not connecting with your partner and means that it's only about stimulation is such a farce. Like, that's not fucking true. And also, I'm not gonna say it. I don't want to be that. I'm a professional, so I'm not gonna dunk on people unnecessarily.
And recognizing that that person could be the father of your children. Now, when you separate sex from conception, the problem is that in people's minds, it's an unnatural result of sex to get pregnant, which is exactly the opposite of the truth, right?
No,
we know that sex and pregnancy are absolutely linked.
First of all, no, they're not. Again, not all sex exists between two people who can get each other pregnant. But second of all, this attitude that like now people believe it's an unnatural consequence, pregnancy of having sex. Like, I don't know that most people believe that, especially heterosexual people or like people who are having sex with someone who can get them pregnant. People are usually aware that that's a consequence. Like, just because birth control has become easily accessible doesn't mean that people are like now living in some kind of fantasy world. Like, that's not, again, this is one of those things where we're like asserting something for the purpose of tearing it down to be like, aha, look what I did. Like, I dismantled the leftist argument. Like, no one said that. Literally no one is arguing that.
But birth control gives you the perception that the worst outcome of sex, the most unnatural outcome of sex, is pregnancy. And when that's the case, not only do people feel like pregnancy is now a choice, that choice can lead to abortions. Because, oh, well, if this is an unnatural result of sex, then I shouldn't have to deal with it, and I don't want to deal with the consequences.
Can I have a source, please? Because this is another thing that really rubs me the wrong way about these videos, is that there is like such a confident assertion about the reality and the mindset of people who clearly she is not. Like, you're not a leftist, you're not a person using birth control, like, you don't know what the mindset of these people are, but you're confidently asserting that you do. But you're also using no relevant sources to back up the bullshit that's coming out of your mouth, and it just drives me banana pancakes. Because, first of all, that's not true. This idea that people think pregnancy is an unnatural, or like she says it in this way as if people think it's like some kind of disgusting outcome of sex. The reality is that lots and lots and lots of people who use birth control eventually want to have children, do have children of their own right now, and are choosing to not actively try to get pregnant for a number of different reasons that don't have anything to do with hating children or thinking that pregnancy and childbirth are disgusting or unnatural or wrong. This is, again, something we're going to talk about in a minute, because she like really starts to... The reality is that a lot of people choose to not have children for a variety of different reasons, and a lot of them have to do with the systemic oppression and injustice that exists in the world, and especially like the financial instability piece. It's just simply not a realistic expectation for people to be having sex as often as most human beings want to be having sex, or some human beings want to be having sex, and just like playing the fucking odds, like rolling the dice about whether they're going to get pregnant or not. It's a responsible and safe decision to choose to not bring children into the world unless you're ready to have children and adequately able to take care of them. And it's endlessly fucking infuriating to me as a social worker when people assert that like babies are always a blessing and something that we should always be striving for. Like, no, that's not fucking true. It is very much a responsible and safe and adult and kind and compassionate decision to those like unborn, like potentially sort of existing children, to not bring them into the world if you're not able to adequately care for them. There are so many fucking children who are being neglected and abused and not adequately cared for because we live in an oppressive world, because sometimes parents are bad people, for like a variety of different reasons. But it blows my mind that someone would actually with their full chest assert that like it doesn't matter if you can't take care of your kids, have more. Like, bitch, what? That doesn't make any fucking sense.
Now, I'm not somebody who believes that sex is only for the purpose of having a child. Sex is about intimacy for a couple. It makes a couple come together closer and express their emotional feelings for each other in a physical way. It's a beautiful way to express our love for one another and come closer together as couples. But there's also always an understanding that it can lead to pregnancy. Even birth control is never 100% effective. And because of that, it should never be treated lightly, even though in 99% of cases, or 96% of cases for most birth controls, you won't get pregnant. The next part of the
This is another thing this is going to take us 70 years to get through this video. This is a very common talking point that like not all birth control is 100% effective all the time, and so you should always be taking it very seriously, potentially getting pregnant. And again, I would just like to remind everyone that first of all, sex doesn't always exist between two people who can get each other pregnant, but second of all, the vast majority of like science-based birth controls, when used correctly, is far and away a safe and effective way to prevent getting pregnant. Mama Dr. Jones talks about this endlessly on her channel. She is a great resource, by the way, for science-based information about people with vulvas, the female reproductive system, and like, you know, just like general science. She's like a gynecologist. So it's a very useful place for information from that regard. But this is frustrating to me. You don't have to be going into every sexual encounter you have, especially if you're a person using birth control, with the expectation that like this might be the time. Like the science tells us that far and away, especially if you're practicing the use of contraceptives in like a conscientious way, they're safe, they're effective. You don't have to operate under the assumption that you're just like rolling the dice, potentially getting pregnant.
Puzzle is the rise of the pure relationship over the traditional relationship. Anthony Giddens, who is another sociologist that Mark Regnerus references quite a bit in Cheap Sex, came up with this theory of the pure relationship. So Giddens' argument about the pure relationship is that nowadays we have an understanding of relationships that's pretty self-absorbed and me based. Essentially, what Anthony Giddens argues is that the pure relationship exists only to meet the partner's needs, and as soon as those needs are met, the relationship can end. Couples are together because of love or because of sexual fulfillment, but they're not together because of tradition or duty. And because relationships are really seen as a way for you.
Duty? I don't want to be in a relationship where the only thing keeping me in that relationship is a sense of duty. This is something that I wanted to talk about. I forgot that she said this actually, but I have some research about this. This idea that relationships should be based around this idea of like commitment and duty to one another, and like you made a promise so you're forced to stay. First of all, it's a very boomer mentality, but also is the reason, or not the reason, but certainly one of the contributing reasons that a lot of people are choosing to get married or have their first marriage later and later in life, and are also changing the ways that millennials and Gen Z and like younger people conceptualize relationships, especially because we know that women and femme-presenting people gaining more financial independence and like independence generally has caused them to rely on men in heterosexual relationships, cause them to rely on men less and less because you don't need to get married in order to fucking exist. But there's also been a shift in the way that people broadly, especially in the United States, perceive relationships, because the attitude previously was that you're not an adult, you're not part of like the big kids table until you get married and like start your life. And now, because of the way that our culture has evolved to conceptualize like youth and leaving the home and like starting your adult life, we don't perceive marriage as like an eventuality or a thing that one needs to do in order to be a legitimate member of society. And so people are feeling less and less drawn to this institution of marriage out of this sense of duty. This is not a bad thing. Like we can see from a variety of different places. I'm going to link a whole bunch of research in the description. The Pew Research Center does a lot of really interesting surveys about like people's attitudes and perceptions of relationships and marriage and things like that. But this also manifests in greater relationship satisfaction. And we've also seen the divorce rate plummet. This like myth, by the way, that like the divorce rate is at 50% and climbing all the time. Like, no, it's fucking not. The divorce rate has continued to go down. And the theory, anyways, is that this is partially related to the way that we have changed our understanding of what relationships are supposed to look like. There's less of a sense of obligation to participate in relationships that you don't want to fucking be in. And so people are choosing to legally tie themselves to people that they don't really want to be with less and less often. This is not a bad thing. Like, I will die on this hill. People making choices to not hurt themselves, to not hurt each other, to not make this very permanent and very financially difficult decision to reverse out of the sense of duty and obligation is not a bad thing.
To find yourself, they're very short-lived. the phrase pure relationship sounds positive. It sounds like it's pure. It's not based on anything else. But marriages and relationships are based on commitments. They're based on traditions and duties to one another and to your children. And it's not just about what am I getting today? Am I happy today? Do I feel fulfilled today by you? Sometimes relationships are about putting in hard work and recognizing that you need to fight for what you built together and for the family that you have.
This is the same thing that Girl Defined tried to say, that like happiness is fleeting, and if you can't be happy in this moment, or you like embrace this idea that you deserve happiness or that your relationship should be based on happiness, that it will eventually lead to the end of your relationship, or, you know, in Girl Define's case, like end of your happiness. That's not true. This attitude that like people are waking up and saying, if I'm not happy today, then this marriage or this relationship is over. Again, I'd love to see a source about this, Abby, except that she doesn't present us with any, so I'm pretty sure that she's just fucking making shit up or like parroting shit that somebody else has fucking made up, it sounds like. But also is like, again, far and away not reflective of what we see about the choices that people are making in marriages and relationships. We're gonna talk about it in a minute, it's fine. It just, this is wrong, first of all, but also annoying and like harmful to people. Like, again, this, I guess the reason that I wanted to talk about this too is that this sort of like villainizes this attitude that it's wrong to want to feel happy in your relationship, which first of all, I think is a bit of a slippery slope, knowing that abusive relationships are disproportionately more common in these like fundamentalist communities, but also like the opposite of what we know about like the research surrounding mental health and how to be like mentally well. It is very much okay for you to want to feel happy and fulfilled and safe and cared for in your relationships. This attitude that your relationship is built on this sense of duty, and so it doesn't matter if you're happy or not, you made the commitment so you have to stay, is the antithesis to mental health, and it's harmful. Like, this is hurting people. Please stop saying this shit on the fucking internet, Abby.
And traditional relationships do that. Traditional relationships recognize that there's a lot more to a relationship than just, I loved you yesterday, but I don't love you today, so now it's over. As relationships became more pure and less traditional, we see a decline in marriage. We see a rise in divorce. And we see sex treated as another path to fulfillment, as opposed to something that is engaged in for the intimacy of a couple within a traditional relationship.
This is what I was saying about her being wrong, and confidently so. It's this like, if A equals B, then B equals C, then C equals D thing, except that B and C and D are all fucking wrong. Okay. So I have a bunch of research that we're going to go through really quickly because it feels important. It is true that the number of marriages in the US has continued to decline. That is true. Her assertion that people are getting married less often because they don't care about traditional relationships and because we view relationships from this like me perspective is not fucking true. The Pew Research Center did some really interesting like surveying in 2017. I have that linked in the description. I would highly encourage you to go look through it if you were at all interested in this topic, because all of the stuff in it is fascinating. I'm not going to go through all of it, obviously, because like, hello. But in the survey that they did among adults who were never married, 58% of people said that they wanted to get married someday, and only 14% of people said that they for sure never want to get married. The other 27% of people said that they aren't sure if they want to get married or not. So this like assertion that she's making that like, you know, the traditional relationship is dead and nobody wants to get married anymore, that's not fucking true. The majority of people do still view marriage as a thing that they want to do someday, but a lot of people talked about financial instability and not finding the right person yet as the reason that they're not married yet. It's also really important for us to talk about the fact that the low rates of marriage doesn't necessarily mean that people are never going to get married. It may very well be indicative of the fact that people are choosing to delay the age of their first marriage. So like, for example, there's a lot of Gen Z people who are, you know, like 18 to like mid 20s that aren't married yet, maybe because they just are delaying getting married for like a number of different reasons. Again, like financial stability chief among them. The other thing that I wanted to talk about here that's really important for us to acknowledge is that generally speaking, being married is more of a privilege now than it has been in generations past. Again, the Pew Research Center has some really interesting data about the education gap that exists between married and unmarried people. The vast majority of people who are married have a college degree or higher. This is significant in my opinion because again, it potentially lends credibility to the idea that people are just choosing to delay marriage until after they've graduated from college and are like in theory more financially stable, but also is an interesting window into how privilege affects the life choices that people are making. We know that going to college is a privilege. College is absolutely fucking astronomically life-changingly expensive. Expensive. And so this expectation that all people will go to college and will graduate from college is simply unrealistic. So we can see then that the people who are making the choice to get married may be doing so either because they feel they've completed their like adult life milestones, but also because having a college degree in theory makes it easier for you to be financially stable, especially when you and your partner both possess a college degree. It opens a lot more doors financially for you than if you don't have a college degree and you're not able to build generational wealth. And so again, this assertion that people just don't give a fuck about relationships or marriage or like wanting to participate in these like traditional roles, that's not fucking true. Far and away, we can see that people value relationships, they value marriage, they value connection. What we are seeing though is that there's a disproportionate amount of systemic inequality that exists that's impacting the way that people are making life decisions. Of course, Abby doesn't talk about this because she's a conservative. She doesn't give a fuck about addressing like the facts of the matter apparently. But this is something that I wanted to talk about because first of all, we talk about this in the ultimatum videos, but I wanted to talk about it here too. This idea that your relationship or like any of your relationships have to look a certain way is literally fucking made up. Marriage and monogamy and cohabitating and having children, none of these things are an eventuality or a non-negotiable for relationships. It is entirely possible for you to have healthy, happy, functioning, wonderful relationships that don't include any of those things or that maybe only include some of those things. And so I really want to encourage and empower people to make choices about your relationships that are reflective of you and what feels safe and authentic and real for you and your life and based on your own value system, because this is another thing that like generations, you know, like younger than like boomers, like Gen X a little bit, have started to embrace, is that this preconceived value system that we have about relationships and life and milestones is literally fucking made up. It's all made up. It doesn't fucking mean anything. You don't have to function in this set of rules if you don't want to. And so it is entirely possible for you to deconstruct these value systems in a conscientious and safe way, and to make responsible decisions for yourself as an adult that prioritize your safety and well-being. And just don't include these like traditional values, especially if they're going to cause you more harm or negatively impact your mental health. Maybe fucking don't. Like, you don't have to. The second thing that I wanted to talk about here, though, is that for the vast majority of people, marriage, cohabitating, monogamy, having children, these are things that feel important. And a lot of people are just choosing to not participate in these like traditional life milestones in the same way that Abby and all of her conservative ilk are, because there is a privilege factor there. And it is very fucking disingenuous and honestly really harmful and annoying to me that she's actually on her channel, like on her platform with her fucking full chest, asserting that people are choosing to do these things or to not do these things because they don't care, because like everyone is immoral and corrupt and disgusting. Like, no, they're fucking not. People are drowning. We can see clearly from the statistics and from the research that our generation, like millennials and Gen Z, is the poorest generation that has existed in a very long time. For the very first time, we are less financially stable than generations before us, which is unusual. And the systemic inequality and the wealth inequality and the wealth gap is continuing to grow. This is a fucking problem. And so I do, again, really want to encourage and empower people to honor that that's real. I don't give a fuck what people like classically Abby say, especially because it's really disingenuous for her to sit up in her fucking ivory tower and be like, oh, I don't know why people don't want to, because they're poor, Abby, because we're oppressed, because we're sad and depressed and mentally ill and trying to fucking survive and trying to do the best that we can with the absolute shit hand that we've been dealt by the people who fucked up our economy and fucked the housing market and fucked our health insurance. Like, it's all a goddamn mess. And so it is very normal for people to have mental health issues as a result of these like circumstances, and it is okay for you to make choices about your relationship and your life milestones and like being an adult that, you know, is reflective of the environment that you're living in. Again, it's just very disingenuous to assert that we should all be like towing the party line and like doing the thing, even though the world that we're living in is so vastly different from the world that our parents and our grandparents grew up in. That doesn't fucking make sense. And again, I just really want to highlight that even if that did make sense, you still don't have to operate on that value system anyways. And so it's just like, it's all fucking bad. It's all bad. I'm gonna link all of the research in the description so that you guys can look at it for yourself. I probably forgot to mention some stuff. Oh, that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about, her like attitude that like sex is being seen as a path to fulfillment. Like, yeah, because it is. Sex is a perfectly valid way to feel fulfilled and close and have emotional intimacy with someone, and you don't have to fucking be married to them to do that. In fact, it's entirely possible and perfectly normal for people to have ethical and safe and respectful relationships with one another that include sex, or that don't include sex if you don't want them to. But like physical intimacy generally, we can see from the research that there is a whole host of cool ass shit that happens in your brain when you have sex with someone, when you orgasm by yourself or in the presence of someone else. Physical pleasure and sexual pleasure is morally neutral, first of all, but also like a normal part of human development. This is developmentally appropriate. This is something that lots of people will experience. Not all people, but lots of people will experience a positive emotional kickback from being sexually intimate with someone. And again, because we see that marriages are continuing to decline, this expectation that you're only going to be sexually intimate with someone who is eventually your husband or wife is fucking disingenuous and is also harming people. It is very normal and like actually healthy for you to experience sexual development as an adult before you reach the age that most people will enter into their first marriage, because this is a normal part of development for human beings if you are a person who's interested in sex. And especially when we're talking about like building sexual wellness or like being able to advocate for yourself and being like a sexually mature person, having practice at being sexually intimate is a very useful and helpful thing. And so again, like all wrong, all bad. I'm sweating now. Let's watch the rest of this video.
So with those two things in mind, that leads us to number 3. Getting married has become less and less easy to do. Men can have access to sex with absolutely no problem. Men don't have to wait to have sex with someone because women don't feel like the sex that they are having needs to be with someone who will support them, raise children with them, or marry them. So sex is economically cheap. Men are able to have sex incredibly easily or access pornography on the internet, and they don't need to wait to have sex. And in doing so, better themselves, have a good career in place so they can support a family. Men are really let off the hook, and women are the ones who are paying the price.
I'm going to explode. She actually, on the internet, out loud, just equated women's sex and sexual organs to, like, money. Like, she actually just insinuated on the internet on purpose that the power and value that women bring to relationships is their pussy. This is a problem. This is fucking dehumanizing. This is such an important thing for us to talk about because this, again, I think is an interesting window into the perspective that people like classically Abby tend to peddle on the internet so much, which is this idea that the ultimate thing of value that women will bring to relationships, and again, like we're speaking in binary terms here, like bear with me, that women will bring to relationships is the ability to be fucked. That's a fucking problem. That's a fucking issue. Like, hello, do we not see how dehumanizing this is to diminish the value of a human being to their sexual organs? Fucking ew, Abby. Ew. Like, mind-blowingly fucking ick. I am so frustrated and honestly, like, flabbergasted by this attitude that a woman's ability to be fucked is something that needs to be so carefully and closely guarded, because otherwise without that, men don't perceive you as a thing of value. Like, maybe you're men, but not all people, and certainly not all relationships exist in this culture where sex is viewed as a thing that's exchanged for power and respect and belonging. That's so toxic. That's a fucking problem. If your partner perceives having sex with you as like an exchange of goods or services, that's very fucking dehumanizing, and I strongly want to encourage you to use the links in the description to find a therapist either for yourself or for you and your partner, because this is not an attitude that has to exist in relationships. I think that's it.
Women want to be married. This isn't a question of whether or not women want to be married. Women want to be married.
Says who?
And when we have economically cheapened sex so that it's just available at any time to anyone, it makes it so that it is a lot harder to get married, because now it's not just, oh, men are going to get married to have sex and have a family. Men now have to come to a conclusion that the relationship they are in is pure enough for it to lead to marriage.
Is that a bad thing? First of all, this is basically just 12 minutes of, if you give them the milk for free, men won't want to buy the cow. And like, fucking, first of all, ew. But second of all, that's not true. Again, I want to point your attention to what we know from the research, which is that the majority of Americans do want to be married. They just state that they haven't found the right person yet, or they're not financially stable enough to feel comfortable to get married. And also, I don't understand why someone choosing to not get married only for the purpose of being able to have sex with someone is a bad thing. Like why would you want to be married to someone who only married you to have sex with you? I think a lot of people want to be married to someone who values them as a human being and who feels like you're a good partner for them, who sees your lives coexisting and mutually evolving in the same direction over time and feels confident and comfortable and happy and excited about living their life with you because of who you are as a human being, not because of your genitals. That's just like such a problematic sentiment. And honestly, like, if that is the type of marriage that Abby is advocating for, we should throw that off a cliff. Like, we should throw that idea out the window because it's a bad one. But again, also, like, this is what we know from the research, that this attitude about marriage as being like an exchange of goods and being viewed as like a legal transaction for the purpose of like being able to exert power over one another is a leading factor in attitudes of dissatisfaction in relationships. Entering into a marriage because you want to have sex with them and for no other reason in particular is a problem and is a recipe for fucking disaster. It is so important that the person that you choose to spend your life with, either in a marriage context or just like generally because you want to be in relationship with them, that you care about them, that you love them, that you value them, that you find some sort of like satisfaction in being in their company. Because also I'd like to point out that lots and lots of people have platonic marriages that don't have any sexual interaction or sexual intimacy at all, and those people are still having healthy, happy, functioning, successful relationships. And of course there's like fallout and like failure there also, but like the point that I'm making is that like sexual intimacy and sex doesn't have to be the thing that binds people together. Like all bad.
Now the really sad thing is number 4. The women who want to wait till marriage are now in a competition with the women who don't. And when I say women who don't want to wait until marriage, I really think we're talking about an empowerment lie that women have bought into from a feminist narrative that says that they will enjoy their lives more if they have sex outside of marriage. But the fact of the matter is, women do not find sexual satisfaction having sex outside of marriage, even though that's what they're told that they will do. And
this feels like telling on yourself, but also, says who? Can I have a source, please? Like, scraps? Can I have anything? Is there like a link? Nothing? Just this book that you read for your book club? Like, I am so endlessly frustrated by her saying, I feel this way, and so therefore all women feel this way. First of all, no, they don't. But second of all, like, this is such a problematic assertion. All women want to get married because they value relationships and men just value sex. Ew, like what a fantastically efficient way to diminish the personhood of everyone involved. Not only are women just viewed as sexual objects, men are also diminished to a single sexual desire, and they're apparently not supposed to want to get married for like love or companionship or like mutual benefit. Men should only operate from this place of like dick first. Like, men should just be walking into life dick first, and women should be walking into life like just waiting, I guess, for like someone to not see them as an object, or thankful, I guess. Women should be thankful about being seen as an object. Like, what in the fucking fuck is going on?
Will have a better sex life outside of marriage. Women don't enjoy sex in the same way when they're not married because it's unstable and they don't know that it's going to last. And even though it can be sexually fun, pleasurable for a short time, it's not sexually satisfactory in the long run.
This is so rich coming from someone who more than likely waited to have sex until she was married. So, like, first of all, how would you fucking know? But second of all, you're not providing us with any relevant statistics or research to back up the point that you're making. That's not true. I looked. I couldn't find it demonstrated in any research anywhere that women don't find relationships or sexual intimacy enjoyable outside of marriage. Hello? Like, where is that coming from? This is literally just fucking made up for the purpose of, like, yapping about it on the internet.
So what ends up happening is you have women who want to wait being put in a position of having to consider their options. Can they wait? Will they be able to find a guy who's willing to wait for them? Because now that sex is so cheap, he can go anywhere. He doesn't have to wait for you. And now all of these people who complain that there's too much emphasis put on beauty in our society and that everyone needs to look perfect. Well, it makes sense. This is why. Number 5, because sex is now mostly about physical pleasure. It's not about emotional intimacy between a couple. It's cheap. It's easy to access.
Ew.
And when sex is about physical pleasure and not about emotional intimacy.
Where is the sex at?
She makes it sound...
Where is it at? Is it out in the streets?
She makes it sound like you could just go have sex at a vending machine. Like, you just put your 2 quarters in and, like, boop, boop, boop. Like,
I don't know what state she lives in, but...
That's not how it works.
We live in the Wild West.
First of all, it's so frustrating that this, like... She continues to say that sex is cheap and easily available, which, like, is hilarious because she's not actively, I don't think, she's not actively looking for new sexual partners, so I'm not really understanding where she's drawing this knowledge from. But also, even if that were true, that sex were, like, so easily available, you could just walk outside your house and be bombarded by people who want to have sex with you, I fail to see how that's negatively impacting relationships, because it is entirely possible for people to have casual sex, for people to have sexual relationships in a whole host of different contexts and still be engaging in emotional and physical and sexual intimacy with someone. Like, there's a whole wide world of different types of relationships that exist that don't have to do, or don't necessarily have to have anything to do with marriage. And so, like, this assertion that, like, sex outside of marriage means that it's inherently devoid of emotional intimacy is literally fucking made up.
Then of course it's going to be based off looks more than anything else. When sex is first and foremost about physical pleasure for men and women, more than a long-lasting relationship that lasts for both sides, then sexual attractiveness becomes the most important thing, not the relationship that spurs a beautiful sex life. And I want to touch on this point, which is number 6. Because marriage is now so much harder to attain, because marriage is not treated as something that people need. It's treated as something that people can do if they want. It's not considered the building block of a family or the building block of a relationship. Women are getting married older. It's harder and harder to meet somebody, and it's harder and harder to get married. So as women are waiting longer and longer to get married, they're also waiting longer and longer to have children. And fertility now becomes an issue because women are getting married older and older. Instead of thinking about fertility, women are looking for confluent love, pure relationships, this fulfillment that they think will come out of marriage, but is really based on their self-absorbed finding themselves mentality. And
people who are able to get pregnant are not choosing to not get married. And again, like, speaking in, like, statistical majorities here based on what we know from the research, people who are able to get pregnant are not eschewing marriage as an institution because they don't give a fuck. A lot of people are choosing to delay the age of their first marriage because they're financially unstable, because they haven't found the right person yet, because we're fucking overwhelmed and depressed and anxious and sad and, like, in need of a whole bunch of fucking shit that doesn't have anything to do with marriage. Like, this is so, we've talked about it already. It's wrong, it's frustrating, it's stupid.
Men that they want to marry are able to avoid making this commitment until much later down the line as well. And then all of a sudden, they're 35 and having to use IVF to get pregnant.
Also, is that a bad thing? Or like not having children until later in life when they're in theory more financially stable, more self-actualized, more situated, happy, stable human beings? Like, why is that seen as a bad thing? This is, again, the thing where, like, children and, like, pregnancy and childbirth are valued above all, and I just don't understand this worldview, because children and babies are also human beings who are worthy of love and belonging, and like partners that like give a fuck about each other. Like, it's just fascinating to me, this attitude that like, just get pregnant, like just have fucking kids. If this hasn't been about babies, what's it all been for? Like, I don't know, Abby, like happiness, self-actualization, like all of the other things that people are striving for.
Because getting pregnant as you get older is more difficult. All of this is a testament to the fact that marriage has become something an elite few people do because they want to, instead of a necessary part of starting a family.
Which is bad.
And as you guys know, I think marriage is incredibly important, and I think it's one of the most beautiful things that people can do.
Why is it so important to you, what other people do with their lives?
Building block. We are seeing women suffer in so many ways.
As who?
Less physical satisfaction, having sex with men that they probably wouldn't want to have sex with but feel pressured to, because if they want to enter into a real relationship, a lot of men are not willing to do so unless they have sex. Waiting longer and longer to get married and allowing sex to be economically cheap, and then struggling with fertility down the line. So the empowerment narrative that, oh, we should all be having as much sex as possible before we're married, outside of marriage, and that's really empowering. Who is it empowering? At the end of the day, it gives over much more power to men. Men are the ones who get to now have access to something that they didn't have access to before, unless they made the commitment, unless they promised to support you and stay with you. And you know who's losing? Women.
She said, why would we want to have casual sex and get our rocks off whenever we want to? Because the men who objectify us then won't value us. Yeah. This attitude, first of all, that all people perceive women and femme-presenting people as sexual objects is disgusting and also disingenuous. That's not true. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of issues like with patriarchal attitudes in heterosexual relationships especially, and like with sexism in relationships, which we're planning on talking about another time. But this attitude that all men buy into this objectified, like women only exist to be sexual objects thing, doesn't have to be true in all relationships, and it is entirely possible for people to find healthy, happy relationships with people of a variety of different gender and sex presentations. It's just endlessly fascinating to me that she actually admits that she herself views women as sexual objects, and we have to very carefully guard our sexual organs and like the ability to have sex, have had sex with, because it's like a power thing. Like Abby is like saying that she views sex as an exchange of power, and if you have sex as a woman, you're giving up your power. Ew. Like, that's a problem. That's not a perspective that needs to exist in order for your relationship to be happy or healthy. And she's like, she's like reverse engineering. Like, she thinks that sex being viewed as an exchange of power or giving up your power is a good thing, and so therefore we should just like undo all of the progress that we've had as a society to go back to this idea that women are sexual objects. I'm gonna say no to that. I'm not gonna sign off on that, because we also know that this leads to disproportionately higher levels of relationship dissatisfaction for women and femme-presenting people and people with vulvas, but also because this lends itself to abusive relationships. This is just like a slippery slope of fucking bad, awful, terrible time for fucking everybody involved. And so like, maybe let's just fucking not. Let's scoot it and wrap up here. So I know that this video was a lot. There's a lot for us to unpack here. Generally, again, I just want to empower people to make choices about your relationships that feel informed by your own value system and by the things that matter to you. Because this attitude that like our modern society and like, you know, kids these days will be the end to moral fibers as we know it, like that, no. That's not true. Every generation has bemoaned the loss of morality, and we know that that's not true. Like this is a cyclical pattern that continues to happen. The parents of people who raised boomers complained about it. Boomers complain about it now. Even like Gen X people are complaining about it. This is just like the thing that we do where we say, you're not doing it the way that I did it, and so therefore that's wrong, and it will cause the breakdown of society as we know it. That's not real. And also, sometimes there are things about society that need to be broken down, like the attitude that women are sexual objects objects and all of their power is held inside of their vagina. That's a problem. That's dehumanizing and not an attitude that anyone needs to abide by because it's harmful and just like lends itself again to a whole host of negative outcomes. Yeah, I guess that's it. I don't really have a whole lot else to like unpack here. We already sort of yammed on for a while. Thank you for watching if you made it this far. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'd love to have you stay because we make content like this, but also like a cute educational moment now and again. And share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.